Good evening and welcome again to the show. I'll tell you, I sit in my house and I turn on the TV and all of a sudden I see a bunch of angry people, yelling at each other, and here comes a guy on camelback running through the crowd. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're holding up signs, and of course there it is in Egypt, downtown Egypt. Then I turn the channel a little bit and all of a sudden they're in Greece. And the federal workers in Greece are upset because they're not getting enough money, or they want more money, or the money they got is getting taken away, and they're all upset. Then you really see the flames flying, planes coming, just absolute chaos and mayhem, and that's, of course, Tripoli, Libya. And then you turn it again, and you got people angry. You got Hitler signs. You got people holding up guys with crosshairs on it. Hitler signs. I don't know if we can get some of these. Hitler outlawed unions too. Of course, the ever favorite Hitler mustache. But this isn't in Egypt. This isn't in
Libya.
Libya. This is in Madison, Wisconsin, the home of the cheeseheads. Madison, Wisconsin. I've been to Madison, Wisconsin. I played youth hockey in Madison, Wisconsin. These are salt of the earth people, and yet they're upset too. I'm telling you, it's almost like you just don't want to watch TV anymore because everyone across the entire planet is upset. They're upset about something. They're rioting in the street. It's just incredible. It's downright unnerving. And what we're going to try and do on this show tonight is we're going to try and keep a semblance of balance. We're going to try and give you both sides of the issue. We're going to try and delve into this from the left, delve into it from the right, and see if we can't make some sense of what the heck is going on. Not just over in the Middle East, where, depending on how you look at it, you have democracy exploding everywhere and tyrants being unseated, or you see the rise of militant Islam, and we're going to have a bunch of little Irans running around. And also what you see in going on right in the heartland of the United States, right where the New York Post put it maybe, well, in its own inimical way, pain in the, can you say that on TV? I don't think you can. You can. Apparently we just did. Pain in the ass, and that's the Democrat legislatures from Indiana that are diving into Illinois, and then from Wisconsin that are diving into Illinois. If I were you right now, I would buy stock in Super 8 or Best Western hotels, because we got liberal Democratic legislatures from state governments all across the Midwest that somehow are fleeing to the liberal haven of Illinois, where they're out of the reach of their home states because they just simply don't want to deal with some of these budgetary concerns. So that's kind of laying the groundwork. There's a lot of unhappiness in the land, a lot of angst, a lot of anger, a lot of people that have certain views on things, and the long and the short of it is, we don't have any money. And then later in the show, we're going to have State Senator Tony Boucher, who's going to be calling in as well, because I got news for you. As bad as it is in Wisconsin, and as bad as it is in Indiana and Ohio, it's just as bad here in Connecticut. Yet in those three previously mentioned states, they have a Republican governor that's not using hope as some sort of option and hoping things are going to get better, but they're taking constructive steps to try and get their states into balance. Not so here in Connecticut with Governor Malloy's new budget, the largest tax increase in the history of Connecticut. Let me say that again. The largest tax increase in the history of Connecticut in the proposed budget by Governor Malloy. We had Jim Foley on this show. Maybe if Foley hadn't come on this show, he would have won. I'm not sure if this show helps or hurts.
We boosted him.
Well, we got that, who's the guy, Dan Carter. Dan Carter. Got him elected.
John Shaban, we got him elected. Tony Boucher, we got her elected.
You're right. This show is a bit of a kingmaker. Not so much with would-be Governor Foley. But I'm telling you, we've got issues here in this state, and they're not unfolding in front of the Capitol in Hartford like you see in Madison and other places. But we have got a lot to talk about, and I appreciate you turning in. Now, today we have a cast of characters. Some here on the set, some hiding in the director's chair back in the studio. That would be the illustrious Al Robinson, founder and editor of Hat City Blog. If you want to see Republicans from all across the Nutmeg State state skewered, you turn it into Hat City Blog. Just Google it. You won't believe what you'll see on that blog. But that's Al Robinson, who may be calling in. But of course, we have Dave Straight.
Always a pleasure.
Financial analyst extraordinaire, and my dear friend, Larry Ditkoff, who is joining us. Larry Ditkoff probably has the highest IQ of just about anyone I know.
You and me put together.
You said it, Marty.
Absolutely. He's a bit of a savant, and he's a very big New York Islanders fan.
Yeah.
And the Islanders have been doing surprisingly good lately, so he's in a very good mood. Now, Larry.
Lost to Toronto the other
as
night.
I was bloviating there.
Yeah. I admired, by the way, your balance, Marty.
Balance? Yeah. That's what we're all about here on the Marty Heiser Show. We want balance. We want perspective. Yeah. We don't want things slanted. But I noticed that you were feverishly writing down as I was going on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
What is it? Where am I getting this whole thing wrong? And what are your thoughts about
Well,
this?
you know, I did have a couple of points, Marty. And from the last time I was on the show, one of the things I said I was going to make sure I was going to bring a writing implement and some pieces of paper so I could make sure I got my points down.
And by the way, is that like a University of Pennsylvania
No, as much of an
letterhead?
Embarrassment as a Penn grad, it's Princeton.
Princeton?
Yeah.
Okay, so you, just for our viewing audience at home, just so
Yes.
they know I hang out with cool people, you are an Ivy League grad. Is that true?
That is true.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just in case you're wondering, do we got intelligent members of this panel? We absolutely do.
You could bring if my mom was still alive, you could bring her down here and she'd tell you straight too.
Oh, all right, okay.
Be that as it may, let's getting back to the issue at hand.
Okay.
You were making the point about the problems we have here in Connecticut and problems that we see in other states,
right,
as far as the budgets are concerned. Here's the difference between what Governor Malloy did and what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin. In Connecticut, we'll start with our home state first. There's a $3.5 billion budget shortfall. About 1 million, I keep saying millions, 1 billion or so, a little more, is going to come from increased taxes.
At the federal level, you're talking trillions. That's even harder.
Yeah, 1.5 trillion. But let's just keep it, just in the states. 1.7 billion is going to come from reducing departments and cuts in services, and another billion is going to come from the unions. Here's the difference. Governor Malloy worked with the unions. The unions know. I mean, I don't think it's really any secret that federal municipal employee benefits, they're pretty good. Right. And for years they've been increasing and increasing, and there's been no competition like you would see, say, in the auto industry, where they've been forced to actually take cuts. But now we're in a situation, Illinois is practically bankrupt, that the unions
in Illinois, the state troopers, the New York State troopers, cannot get their gas tanks filled for their things because the gas stations won't give the state of Illinois credit anymore.
Well,
I saw that on 60 Minutes.
Well, I'm sure I wouldn't, if we have New York troopers going to Illinois for gas, I wouldn't fill up their tanks either.
No, I'm talking about Illinois troopers in Illinois.
I know.
Did I say New York?
You did.
Oh, my bad.
That's okay. But either way.
A long way to go.
Yeah, I know it is.
A long way to go.
What are they doing there? Now, if they were Democrat legislatures, I can see
on the way.
They would flee to Illinois and stay at the Best Western and have the pancake breakfast.
I'll get to that in a moment,
hang out
Marty.
Are they getting paid while they're there, by the way?
Of course they are.
So they're on company time partying in Illinois.
That's right.
Okay,
I'm sorry. You're going to explain. He's an Ivy League grad. He's going to explain all this stuff.
Governor Walker in Wisconsin. So Malloy's working with the unions here, and the unions have agreed to a certain percentage of rollbacks.
Right.
In Wisconsin, Scott Walker, who took a lot of money from the Koches, the very wealthy billionaires who have a history of union.
Hold, you say that, but Scott Walker today on TV said he has never met the Koch brothers. So they just poured money in there. He never met them. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, it's funny you mentioned that because
he didn't even know him on the phone when the guy called in.
Yeah, he was talking. But that's right. That's exactly right. There was a prank. I don't know if you're familiar.
I heard it.
Okay, there was a prank.
He said, "What you got to do is put guys into the crowd."
Troublemakers into the crowd. I'm not.
And the governor said, "We thought of that, but
yeah,
then we
I'm not
to
even.
get
I don't even want to get it. I don't even want to get into that. But what he is proposing is that the only thing that could be negotiated with unions are pay raises, and then only that up until a COLA, cost of living adjustment. In essence, what he is looking to do is just eliminate unions in general. That's what he wants to do. Instead of what our governor did, where he just was able to get some concessions without throwing out the entire, collective bargaining structure. And that's why I think people are so angry in Wisconsin. Not so much that it's cuts in benefits, that it was done literally unilaterally and saying your voice is gone. And I should point out, I'm not
Here's the
necessarily
part
biggest
where
fan.
it's not so unilaterally. You see, in Wisconsin, back in November, they had an election. And this guy that you're lambasting now, who's the governor, ran exactly on this platform. This is what he said he was going to do. He was going to get the Wisconsin budget in balance, and this is how he was going to do it. And all the people of Wisconsin, not just the union people that have been bussed in from other cities and so forth, that are holding up placard, which, by the way, some of these placards with the crosshairs and the comparisons to Hitler, I mean, I thought your party was going to have a season of civility.
Well, you've got that little jingle, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Find that jingle.
Marty, that's hyperbole. I'm not for Hitler.
Okay. So when the Tea Party does it and they have a few signs that are bad, that's absolutely
No, that's
up front,
hyperbole.
and it's terrible and it's awful.
Like what?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
No, I'm saying that's hyperbole. I think it's pretty silly to dress up in colonial garb. I think that gives you some moral imprimatur to tread on the American Revolution to advance a point of view when it has nothing to do with what Thomas Jefferson said.
Well, first of all, I think that the Tea Party, what they're talking about is individual responsibility, individual liberty and freedom, and not an oppressive federal government. I think that's what they're talking about. And I can give you examples of that. So using colonial garb to express that, I think, is a beautiful expression of political speech, if you will. Yet when you see what's going on here, I mean, we have the pictures of these signs that are going on.
Yeah.
Somehow the left is remarkably silent, where they're outraged when some of this stuff goes on with the Tea Parties, which, by the way, when you look at a Tea Party rally, I mean, it's like a church picnic. I mean, it's really kind of strange.
So here's a classic example of that. So here's the Democrat representative from Massachusetts, who makes the comment in a speech that sometimes we need to get a little bloody when necessary. And, you know, then there was the...
And I think this guy was the same guy that was lambasting what happened in Arizona.
As vitriol.
As vitriol. It was a result of the political speech that this has happened. And I think he's since gone back on what he said and apologized for it, I think.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Dave.
So one other thing. So the SEIU, which donated $27 million to the Obama campaign, came out with a really catchy little jingle today that's been making the waves on YouTube. And here's how it goes. When the boss comes calling, they'll put us down. When the boss comes calling, gotta stand your ground. When the boss comes calling, don't believe their lies. When the boss comes calling, take his toll. When the boss comes calling, don't sell your soul. When the boss comes calling, we gotta organize. Let them know we gotta take those bastards down. Let them know we gotta smash them to the ground. Let them know we gotta take those bastards down. And it goes on and on. So that's what you get for $27 million of the Obama administration, a little jingle about taking the bastards down. That seems like it rises to the level of vitriol, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Let me ask you something. Have either of you guys ever worked in a union?
I have.
I have. Yeah.
United Retail Workers Union, Jewel Food Store, Hubbard Woods, Illinois.
Okay. I worked at Verizon for 14 years, and I was around during some of the large strikes that they have, and I know that some of the things that unions have done, you know, aren't really for the best interests of society. All these different types of job titles, and yes, sometimes it creates a sense of entitlement. But if you believe that workers who can't negotiate for themselves individually should have some voice in how they, how they are treated in the workplace.
Are you in a union right now?
No.
And how are you treated?
I'm treated pretty well.
Pretty good? So you don't have to be in a union to be treated pretty well?
Clearly not, Dave. But
I worked for 25 years in the corporate sector.
Yeah.
I was in the UPS before I started in that. When I was in college, in UPS, and didn't necessarily. I paid a lot of dues. Didn't feel like I got much for it. But 25 years in the private sector, never in a union, got treated pretty well.
Okay, Dave, are you suggesting? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of unions. That there's no place for collective bargaining? Should we go back to the sweatshops? Should we go back to the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire? Why do you think the rise of the unions with Samuel Gompers, Marty's giving me a look, why do you think that came about? Is because people were treated very shoddily.
Okay,
that's what led...
First of all, Al Robinson is joining us. Al, do you have something to add to this?
Well, I'll phone in from time to time because I'm in the back room here trying to keep this show afloat. But a couple of things. First of all, the pictures and images that you use is so a little more of the same hypocrisy I see from people on the extreme right who will turn a blind eye to thousands and thousands of images that we've seen in the Tea Party rallies you call church gatherings during the...
No, I think I called it a church picnic. A church picnic.
Whatever you want to call it. I call it just nonsense. In terms of what's going on in Wisconsin, the interview, the prank call, although it is somewhat funny, was very revealing on what this guy's intentions is. It's not about the budget. It's about union busting, plain and simple. Larry was absolutely correct in what he was saying. So much so that, there was an announcement about the budget, and they say we don't have a budget crisis to the point where we have to, destroy collective bargaining. That's the heart of what union is all about. And I am my father was in the union. I can tell you for many years, I was walking side by side with him on the picket line, fighting against one of the biggest monopolies in our country, in the history of this country, AT&T, our Southern New England Telephone. And you tell me that collective bargaining put food on my parents' table. They gave my dad a 40-hour work week. It gave my dad rights that he did not have. I mean, he went on the picket line probably like every other year, fighting for his rights. So yeah, collective bargaining is very important. And in fact, that's not what we heard during this election. That government did not talk about union busting in this type of way. We didn't hear this stuff from the Tea Party movement. And I think it's very revealing about what this is really all about. It's about busting up one of the most strongholds of the Democratic Party, which is union. This is something that's been going on for, I don't know, the Republicans wanted to do this for at least the last 50 years. And again, in that telephone conversation, he said, Wisconsin is first, and we got all these other states where we're following the same direction. That's not about the state budget. If it was about the state budget, he'd be focused on Wisconsin. But he talked about this is Wisconsin's first, and it's going to be Florida, and it's going to be Ohio, and it's going to be Indiana. This is a bigger thing at work here, and I think it's almost naive to say otherwise. I'll let you guys keep going. I'll call in from time to time.
All right. Thank you very much. What do you think about that?
Well said, Al. Well said.
So here's the problem, though. What happens is if they don't do away with collective bargaining, then what happens that the other two pieces that are passed will then go to negotiations, and collective bargaining will just tear them up. So in terms of increasing the amount of money that these guys have to put into their retirement and what they have to put into their health care program will just get chewed up, and nothing will ever be impacted.
How did we do it in Connecticut? How did Malloy go extract concessions from unions?
Yeah, no, I would say Connecticut is in trouble because we haven't done what needs to be done. Yeah, we have Professor Jim Bolano on the show. Professor Bolano, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Marty.
We're just talking a little bit about the unions and what's going on in Madison, Wisconsin. I would say what we're talking about is from the left, if you will. They're saying this is union busting and it's the wrong thing that's going on. From the right, in the form of Dave Straight, they're saying these are state budgets that are out of whack and there need to be concessions, and that's what's going on. What do you say about all this?
Well, I think there's an important distinction to be made, and that's where it's being muddied. I think on the left, we're talking specifically about government unions, public service unions here, and what Governor Walker is doing there is, and it's about the budget and it's about givebacks, but the controversial point is this taking away of collective bargaining rights. Nobody is suggesting that we take those collective bargaining rights away from private sector unions, but there's a big difference there. We could talk about collective bargaining in a minute if you want, but basically these are government unions funded by the taxpayers, and the collective bargaining process is skewed, it's broken, it's corrupt, if you will, in the government arena. It's a different case for private sector unions, and nobody is suggesting that.
Yeah, you wrote an article about that last year. What was the basis of that article?
The basis of the article was that government unions are growing. There was a number that about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago that nationwide, for the first time in history, government unions now outpace private sector unions nationally, something like 51 to 49%. And just as an aside, in the state of Connecticut, unionized workers, this used to be a big manufacturing state, the government unions have a 64% membership compared to the 36% of private sector unions. So the point of the article was that when collective bargaining takes place in the private arena, it's a fight over a pie that's kind of a finite thing. The ownership takes into account a lot of different things: rent, the dividends, expenses, taxes, and what's left over in that pie is a fight between management and the union. And it's a finite pie, and whoever has the best bargaining position wins. In government, the process is corrupted because the unions elect officials that are amenable to their needs. And there is no finite pie. What I said in the article was it's not a pie at all. It's really like a wedding cake. It's multi-tiered. And the thing is the taxpayers are the ones on the hook for this, and they're not at the bargaining table. It's the politicians and the unions that put them there and donated to them, and the taxpayers foot the bill. It's very different from the private sector. And it's basically an open-ended arrangement, and that's why it's having such an impact in states and localities across the country.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of this is also a result of this dreaded recession that we're in the middle of, and everyone's very tight. There isn't money going around, whereas in the past, if the economy is clicking along fine, no one really stops to notice this stuff. Unions get a little increase, and everything's fine. But this time, everyone's cutting back, and they're saying, wait a minute, my taxes are going up to pay these union benefits and these pension plans, and these guys are balking because they're asking to donate 3% to their health care? I mean, it's just unseemly at some level.
It is. And, going back to this whole argument that's being portrayed mostly in the kind of the mainstream media, the left media, is that, they're lumping private and public unions together. But the fact is that when Roosevelt passed the Wagner Act, which is like the Magna Carta for unions, he specifically excluded government unions from that document. Harry Truman didn't unionize government workers. Only a handful, maybe a little more than that, a handful of states and large cities up until the early 1960s had government unions. They foresaw what we're seeing now, that it becomes a corrupt process because it's the taxpayers funding it. And it wasn't until 1962, John Kennedy signed an executive order which allows federal employees to unionize. And from that point on, that's when the floodgates opened in the 1960s and 1970s. And now virtually all government employees, state, local, county, across the nation are unionized. And it's just been a drain, because when those folks retire, they still get in those benefits that they've been collectively bargained, and they collect them health care, pension for a long, long time.
Wow, listen, it's great having a college professor on because, frankly, you know your stuff. And if they want to read that article, they can just Google your name, Jim Bolano, and the article will pop up.
I think one of the toughest things to accept in this whole thing, Marty, is these guys in Wisconsin are, on average, getting $89,000 a year. So, and the literacy rate up there is maybe around 65–70% at the most. And just by way of comparison to the private sector, I have a niece that's a teacher in a private school. She makes a third of what those teachers are getting. And I asked her, I said, well, what's your literacy rate? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, when they graduate the 6th grade, how many of those kids are proficient in math, English, and history? And she said, well, they all are, or they don't pass. So think about this. You get much better results for a third the pay. Don't you think the whole public school system is probably a little bit screwed up?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think with the 10-year program, and I guess the largest union in the country right now is the teachers' union. And I think we've seen, the result of that. But Larry,
Marty,
you're feverishly writing down on your Ivy League pad there.
It looks like doctors writing.
Marty, look,
okay,
can we agree?
Where are we wrong?
Look, can we?
Well, we're not.
Can we? I like the balance. I like the commitment.
That's why you're here. Would you balance?
I know. Look, in regards to the public sector unions, I think everyone agrees their benefits are probably too high. The only issue is, do you necessarily eliminate the collective bargaining process? Do you roll back unions entirely? And I understand what the professor is saying about, well, the private sector is different from the public sector. Here's where one of the things I would disagree with him on is he said that it's the taxpayers that are footing the bill, and the taxpayers don't get a seat at the table.
It is a little,
Marty,
it's
you
a
got to
little,
let me. Marty,
let me just interject. It is my show. It is a little. It is a little unseemly. How much did the CIS union donate?
$27 million.
$27 million was donated to the Democrats and the Obama campaign by these unions that are now have unfettered access. This guy goes into the. You can get a close-up of this guy here. He goes into the White House. I mean, he's bragging about it. He's in the White House 2-3 times a week, in the Oval Office, and then he's on the phone the other time.
He's the head of the AFI.
Marty, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me.
What? I'm kidding you that they're buying access and then the taxpayers
you're talking
are
about when Cheney was vice president, the way he had all these oil guys in the office.
Well, he should have
all the time.
more.
And in addition.
We do need oil.
Yeah, you also
have you seen what we paid at the pump?
Hey, Marty, have you ever been on an oil rig? Was that you on the Deepwater Horizon? I don't think so.
Look, the accidents happen, and what happened in the Gulf was a tragedy, but that doesn't mean that we do away with the internal combustion engine and go back to all the horse and buggy.
Man, Marty, as Chris Russo used to say, will you please? I mean, come on, that's not the issue.
Well, you're saying because we had a terrible
No, you're
oil
making the
accent.
point about that unions, because they've given a lot of money, have a lot of access to politicians, specifically Democrats, and that they are impacting the way legislation is being written to their benefit, but to the detriment of the rest of the country. That's what you said.
I couldn't put it better. And don't get me started on Obamacare.
I don't want to be part of it. We did that for an hour.
Because I want to get, what do they call those things? Variances or something like that on Obamacare, but the only one getting them is these unions. It's true. They're getting, what are they?
Exemptions.
Exemptions, yeah. So, I mean, look,
but for you to say that Democrats for you to say that only liberal groups, now that Obama is president, have had access because they have money to give to campaigns, and that didn't happen under Bush, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying probably the NRA, for example, those dreaded gun toys.
I'm not talking about the NRA. No, I'm not talking about the NRA. I'm talking about an industry, a for-profit industry, such as the oil companies. You don't think they gave more money to Republican causes? Come on,
funny thing about oil companies and stuff like that is they tend to spread the money around. I'm telling you they do. I'm telling you they do, because if there's a very solid Democrat congressman, the oil companies will pony up for those guys too. They do.
Marty.
They're looking for guys that are going to be in office.
I am talking about, I'm talking about impacting of legislation.
Yes. I agree. I concede the point.
Okay.
Oil companies donate money to Republicans. Republicans are in office, and they send to take the call. Much like this Koch guy who got through to the governor in Madison when all hell was breaking loose on the Capitol. Access, baby.
I want to make it.
Access.
Right. I want to make a point.
Posing as a Koch person.
That's true.
It was a prankster. It was whoever it was.
Yeah.
I just want to make one.
Probably reads Doonesbury or something.
These stockholders, I just want to make back to the
professor.
To the professor's point, and stockholders don't have a say at the bargaining table. Yet when General Motors or any sort of union-based firm,
I would give you some pushback on that. I think stockbrokers have stockholders have unbelievable control over publicly traded companies. Unbelievable.
No, they don't have a seat at the table. Management has a seat at the table, and they represent stockholders. The way the governor represents the people, or the government, when they negotiate with these unions, represents the people.
But shareholders have voting rights.
Absolutely. Shareholders can force a company to break up and sell off and spin off and do a lot of
approve mergers.
Yeah.
You think, Marty, yes, they can do something when something is brought to them, like approval of a merger, like PRGF. But how much power does an individual stockholder have, unless he's a 50% holder, to affect legislation on his own? Or affect corporate policy on his own?
I know there's a point here somewhere.
I made it.
You are going to land this plane.
No, I made it, Marty.
What's the point?
The point is that to say that private sector unions and public sector unions are different, because in the private sector, the taxpayer isn't footing the bill, and they don't have a say, which is what the professor said.
Right.
And I'm saying in the that's in the public sector. In the private sector, shareholders don't have a say.
Shareholders have the ultimate control because they can sell the stock. and then the stock price goes down.
Then they can say, all right, they can say, and we can vote, and we can vote politicians out. We can vote politicians out.
Yeah, you
So
can't.
let me interject something here. So 2 weeks ago, we had an interview that Al had done with Jim Himes, and he asked Jim Himes, well, geez, what do you think about needs testing for Social Security? And there was a little bit of a love fest there. And, well, of course we have to do needs testing for Social Security, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Why are people so quick to break a contract with people that are retired, that are people that have worked hard, paid into the system their entire life? Why do we run out and we're jumping through hoops to bust that contract, but we have the president helping to orchestrate labor activity across the country to the detriment of the states when they're just trying to balance their budgets? Why did they get that support when Social Security recipients are getting thrown under the bus again? I don't get that. Why
I agree with Dave that I wasn't aware that there was a discussion to make Social Security needs-based. People, they pay into a system, and they should get the benefit of it. So I would agree with you on that. I do want to make some points to you just in general about overall, because we haven't really gotten to overall governmental spending. I don't know if I mentioned to you, Marty, but I volunteer at the CACD, the Community Action Center in Danbury. It's on North Street. And one of the things that I do is I do tax returns for people, and there are certain income limitations as part of being a volunteer for the IRS. It's actually one of the few times you get a call from the IRS and you're not afraid because you volunteer to hear from them. And you deal with, people, and David's talking about individual responsibility. Someone who's maybe 60 years old, someone who's disabled, someone who's blind, someone who has a job that could pay them only a couple of $1,000s a year, and they get some Social Security money, and that's depending upon what your adjusted gross income is. Some of that is taxable, and you hear this outrage on the part of these Republican guys who say, these unemployment benefits, these other benefits, not necessarily so much Social Security, but certainly on unemployment, we can't have that, we can't support it. It's not a nanny state. But then, on the other hand, you hear the extension of the so-called Bush tax cuts at the over 250 level for married filing joint. It's essentially 3% between, 33 and 36 and 39, 36 and 39, right? So it's 3.6%, and that when those people are being asked to be taxed, and again, I'm not a soak the rich kind of guy. Actually, I hope to be one of them.
But they squeal
I'm not done. Hold on. But the argument is made that this is, this is so undemocratic. This is awful. The guy who's making like the Kochs, who make those kind of money,
like George Soros.
Like George Soros.
Yeah.
He pays his tax. Yeah, he's a big Democrat, but he pays his tax.
What do you think Warren Buffett's effective tax rate is?
I don't know.
6%.
How do you know?
Well, that's what's been reported. I don't know. It's hard to get real facts, but that's what's been reported in the news. But George Bush came out about 6 years ago and said, "Look, the rich don't pay taxes," and they don't as much. They find ways to get around it, right?
All right.
Al Robinson, you have a thought on this?
Yeah, a couple of things. Again, let me just reiterate one more time, guys. We had the mayor of Wisconsin did a prank call. He had a prank call done on him, and he said in the prank call that Wisconsin is first, and then it'll be Indiana, then it'll be Ohio, and then it'll be all these other states. We gotta destroy this collective bargaining nonsense. If it was about the state of Wisconsin and their particular budget, why on earth are we talking about other states and the domino effect and all this nonsense? Again, this is straight up union busting, and this is something that particular governor did not talk about during the campaign. And furthermore, there's been documented evidence showing that the stuff that he's talking about in terms of the budget and how bad it is isn't really true. And thankfully, in the state of Connecticut, we had Governor Malloy, who's trying to get, and hold on to your seats here, because this is a lot of money, $2 billion in concessions from the unions for the next 2 years. $2 billion. And to wrap your head around this, when Governor Rell was in office, she was able, through negotiations and trying her best to work this thing out, over $700 million in concessions from the unions. So Malloy's trying to get more. And he has to deal with this this pension that was done over a 20-year pension agreement that was done between then Governor Rowland and the unions. So Malloy's having to deal with a Republican mess in order to try and deal with a $3.5 billion deficit. And I have yet to hear anything from the Republicans as a counteroffer to what the governor has been put on the table in terms of concessions from the unions. Because again, $2 billion he's trying to get back from the unions. And I would like to see the Republicans put up a counteroffer to see how they would achieve more than $2 billion from the unions over 2 years.
So he's trying to do the same.
Let me just give you a little pushback when you're talking about Ohio and Indiana and Wisconsin and soon to be Connecticut and some of these other states. The common denominator isn't a cold-hearted Republican desire to bust unions. The common denominator is all those aforementioned states are broke. There's broke. You just can't get blood from a rock. There's no more money. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. But
so you don't think the unions, if that's explained to them, as it's been here in Connecticut, that wouldn't have been understood? You don't think he couldn't have just engaged the union in constructive discussions and say, look, here's the facts, here's the information, work with me here?
But isn't the government supposed to be of the people, for the people, by the people? Then why do people fear that government so much that they have to have a union to protect them? So what the problem is with the school system in particular right now, if you're in a union and there are time for layoffs, guess who gets laid off? The person with the lowest seniority. So and potentially you can be getting rid of your best people in that process. Go ahead. So I mean, basically, there is no reason at all to have unions in the public sector. It's absurd.
Well, luckily for us, we have Tony. How many state senators are there in Connecticut?
There's 36 state senators, Marty.
So is it fair to say you're one of the 36 most powerful people in the Nutmeg State? Is that overstating it?
I wouldn't go that far, but we.
Well, joining us is State Senator Tony Boucher, and basically we're having a heated discussion right now about state unions, what's going on in Madison, Wisconsin, and what needs to go on here in Connecticut. And one of the members of the panel said that Governor Malloy has gotten $2 billion in concessions from the unions, and the previous governor was only able to give $700. How much of that is accurate, and what do you see in Governor Malloy's budget?
Well, first of all, let's first recognize that he has $3.4 billion in new taxes first in the next 2 years, and then he's hoping for $1 billion in each of the next 2 years, but that is not a certainty by a long shot. That has to be negotiated, and they have to voluntarily come to the table. They've been resistant to do that in the last few years when there's been a supermajority Democratic, in both the House and the Senate. So, the prospects of that are uncertain. So given that, there's only a small portion of the budget that really is showing any kind of real reductions. And this budget, by the way, does spend more. In fact, $1 billion more in the next 2-year biennium. So instead of actually reducing, it continues its upward spiral. To get the unions to sit down and negotiate, again, it has to be voluntarily, unless, he puts out the specter that he will actually cut employees and have some serious layoffs. To achieve that same kind of reduction without those concessions could mean anywhere up to 10 to 14,000 people being laid off. So that is very highly unlikely, particularly since that union element has some very strong leadership positions in the House of Representatives in Connecticut and has for some time, but much more so today than ever before.
Is it oversimplifying it to say that Governor Malloy, in essence, is avoiding some of the tough decisions that you see being taken in Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin? I mean, as I look at the balance sheet of Wisconsin, it looks remarkably similar to the balance sheet of Connecticut. The over $3 billion in debt, bloated pensions and benefit plans for state unions. It looks remarkably similar between the two states, but it doesn't seem like we're doing much.
Well, in actual fact, Connecticut's benefits, pensions, and wages are much higher. They are asking to contribute more in Wisconsin, but they're already at their current situation is they do contribute more than Connecticut does. So I think we have a much further to go. In fact, I think we're probably the last remaining states with some of the highest. I think we're the highest state wages in the country, and certainly its health care and pensions are the most generous of anywhere. I think we don't have to even look to Wisconsin. We can just see what the rhetoric has been across the state lines, both in New York and New Jersey.
Well, I'm reading your article, and you're quoting that particularly in Connecticut that the budget deficit is $3.4 billion, and we've just got
per year.
Yeah, right.
For both of the next 2 years. It's really quite remarkable just how bad it is. And that comes from, again, as I said, for the last 30 years, we had one party in the majority in the state legislature, but in the last 5 or 6 years, during the entire time that Governor Jody Rell was there, they had a supermajority, which means they could override absolutely any veto the governor had, and she knew that. And they weren't willing to negotiate at all. Remember, the last budget cycle, which was only a year and a half ago because they delayed the decision so much, there was no reductions hardly at all. The union concessions were very minor. There were a few days off without pay. There was just slightly more increases in the contributions or copays to either pharmaceuticals or a doctor's visit. Very little contribution to the premium itself, and hardly any changes in the pension plan, which in order to continue and by the way, wage increases continued during the last 2 years. The way they handled supposedly balancing that budget was, again, going to taxes first. They taxed the highest wage earners with a large increase, which they added to in this new budget as well, going to the same people. Remember, 80% of the taxes in Connecticut are paid by 20% of the public. And most of those high wage earners are your small business owners that run their expenses through their income tax. So, hey, it may seem like they're making $500,000, but they may only be bringing home $70,000 a year after they pay all their expenses. This goes after them. And last budget, not only did we tax those job creators, we also taxed profitable businesses at 10% surcharge, which was supposed to end this year. This new budget continues that. Not only do they do that, but they increase tax brackets. We make 8 tax brackets from $30,000 all the way up to $1 million. And by the way, remember, those new taxes on everyone are retroactive to January 1, 2011.
Yeah, I like how they do that. Senator Boucher, is there any chance that you and the other Republican senators could get in a minivan, cross state lines to a Best Western, eat some pancakes, and hang out in those hotel rooms and put a stop to this all?
Well, most of us who have been in the minority have never shirked our responsibility to stay in there and to fight it out, and to also to stand up for our million people that we represent in this state. We represent over 1 million people in this state, and we have never yet shirked our duties to do that and run away from what we're supposed to do.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, we have members of the panel. We have Larry Ditkoff here. He's in the investment community, and he has a couple questions for you if you have a minute.
Sure.
Hey, Senator Boucher, thanks for calling in. I appreciate your input.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure you're much more knowledgeable about the tax situation in the state of Connecticut, given that you live it. Just want to ask a couple of questions. One, how are the marginal tax rates, and I don't know the answer to this, it's not a setup, in Connecticut versus other states? Do you know?
Yes. I can tell you that the ones that Connecticut likes to compare itself to are adjacent states, because people are so mobile and businesses, and we're a small state, it doesn't take much to just move your business across the line, particularly today when everybody is, computerized, and they pack up their computers and their people, and they can move. So if we compare, this is what really is troubling about this particular legislation in this budget proposal. Rhode Island took their highest marginal tax rate, reduced it as of January 1 of this year to 5.9, because they wanted it to be under 6.5. This proposal takes our 6.5 and goes up to 6.7, even more so. So they're ahead of the game. You look at Massachusetts, and they're 5.3%. That's their highest rate. And New York, the highest taxing state adjacent to us, just is taking theirs down because they recognize it to 6.85. But again, they don't have taxes on clothing under $50, and some of the other things that are being proposed as well. And they do not have the highest gas tax in the country, which this proposal aims to do. They don't have the highest in the country inheritance tax. Many states do not tax cars as property, and many states don't tax your pensions once you reach that age. So we really are saying to our seniors, we don't want you to stay in our state. And that.
Senator, you're bumming me out here. You're bumming me out. We have good schools, we have good high-tech companies, and we have representatives like you, so people should stay.
Yeah, people should definitely stay.
We're here to say, to really advocate for our state and to speak up for the tax policies we feel that would benefit us, and also to keep businesses here. We have a great educational system. We have a very highly educated workforce. We have a beautiful environment to live in.
You're doing terrific, Tony.
It is a beautiful state.
Right.
We're your biggest fans.
I just wanted to...
Go ahead. Larry has another question.
You made mention that a lot of the increase in taxes was going to come from small businesses. I know here, at least in Fairfield County, a lot of the wealth, if not all of the wealth, is really tied into the financial community. It's a lot of people in hedge funds, a lot of people, down on Wall Street. So wouldn't they really be, the paying the most, and not so much a guy who's a painting contractor?
That's right.
Well, that was true in the last budget cycle. Okay, but this particular budget reaches right down into those making $50,000 a year, and it substantially increases. The heaviest hit is probably between $50,000 and $100,000, and again, $200,000 to $400,000, because we already hit the guys at the top last time. We hit them again. If where we were 19 or 18 months ago was those individuals were at 5%, and now they're at they're going to be, or could be, at 6.7%, which is nearly a 2% increase. That's a huge amount. In fact, I had one gentleman who was fortunate to be at the high income a year ago, and he called me up and he said, "Do you know that I'm not getting any pay in all of November and all of December because they went retroactive. The budget was passed in September. They went all the way back to January 1 of that year, and so they had to make up for those taxes not paid, and he literally got no pay right over the Christmas holidays." Boy, I'm telling you, he was very upset. You're right. A lot of our cash cows are in the financial services and the investment community, and they are looking at Connecticut now because a lot of them moved here from New York.
Senator, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and folks can get in touch with you by just Googling your name and get you on the emails going right into Hartford. And we thank you very much for taking the time to call in.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
All right, take care. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Dave, what do you make of all this?
The problem we have in Connecticut isn't that we're not getting enough taxes. We're getting all the taxes we need. It's that we've had Democrats in control for 30 years that have committed the public to obligations that we can't afford to perpetuity. So it's a real problem. But can I just relay a quick story that I think is kind of interesting?
Please.
Sure.
So I was back in Chicago, and obviously Chicago politics right now are pretty interesting. We have Rahm Emanuel, from Men in Tights. You saw his picture, right?
I saw
his tights and dancing and all the rest.
Photograph floating around the internet.
Yeah.
He was a dancer at one point?
Yeah,
I didn't see it.
ballet dancer. Anyway, I have a niece that's going to Chicago University, and she's pre-law. Her name's Sarah. And I'm always a big fan of hers, and she's extremely liberal, way on the left. And every time I sit down with her, I think, oh my gosh. So she was all excited about telling me about how great it is that these politicians are fleeing Wisconsin and standing up for the unions and on and on and on. And so I listened to that for a while. Anyway, I got tired of it. And I said, well, by the way, how are you doing in school? And she said, man, I cannot believe how tough school is right now. She said, I study all the time. I have no free time. I don't feel like I have any friends. And I said, well, you can be able to handle that. And she said, well, Uncle Dave, I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting about a 3.8. So I thought, geez, that's pretty good, isn't it?
It's pretty good.
Pre-law, not bad. And I said, your roommate, you've been with her ever since high school, and she's still there, right? Her name was Beth. And I said, well, how's Beth doing? She says, gosh, she's just having such a ball. Said, you know, she's one of the most, she's cute, so she's probably the most popular kid on campus, dates all the time, Friday nights she's out all night. She is just loving life. Said, well, wow, how can she do that and get good grades? Says, she's doing okay? Well, actually, academically, she's not doing so good, and I think she's going to have trouble, you know, making it past this year. I said, man, that was really sorry. You guys are really close friends. And she said, yeah, no, it really kind of breaks my heart. I said, listen, you know, I'm from Chicago. I've got connections at Chicago University. I'm going to make a call tomorrow. I'll take care of this. She says, well, that's fantastic. What are you going to do for me? I said, well, look, I'm going to call the administration, and I'm going to say, listen, take 1% of your GPA and give it to her. She said, well, you can't do that. I've worked hard for that grade. I deserve that grade. She's not working hard. Why should she get 1% of my GPA? Doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, you know, Sarah, seems to me you've just graduated. You're no longer a Democrat. Now you're a conservative. So I just thought I'd share that on a real-time basis. But anyway, one other thing I did want to mention, too, is, and getting back to the whole thing on vitriol, if you can zoom in on this, by the way, this is actually a map from the Democrats had on their website that they didn't really want to talk about or show you.
Targeting? Why, that's militaristic.
Yeah,
that's,
and vitriol, and maybe someone's going to get shot out there. Oh my gosh, look at this. Isn't that Arizona?
Oh.
Isn't that where someone got shot?
Targeting. Oh.
Yeah. So
Those
I can't,
Democrats.
you know, I mean, that's powerful enough to motivate someone to really do something crazy, I'm sure. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. Yeah. But
all right, Marty, a
yes.
couple of things. One, the reason why, I guess you're making reference to Sarah Palin's map and what happened with Gabrielle Giffords. She was, the only reason why that was really newsworthy is Gabrielle Giffords pointed it out in, I think it was in March of 2010, that she thought it was the wrong way of going about it. That was one thing. The second thing, I want to talk a little bit about your story with the donate some of the grade point average. Here's the thing with taxes, and again, I see this when I'm at CACD, when I'm working on these tax returns. You have people, they can't make it without a little help. You give them a little help, and again, the idea is eventually, you know, with the help that they have, they don't become a so-called burden on society, but, you know, they advance themselves, and, you know, then they become, you know, part of the tax-paying base. Imagine, Marty, there was even a time maybe your grandfather or mine, you know, needed a little bit of help. And that, I think, is, you know, to a certain extent, that's the American way. It's the difference between capitalism and communism.
But
is the worth of the individual.
You're donating your time to help these people put together their tax returns, right?
Right. No, okay. I put together the return for them.
So that's a very benevolent, humanitarian thing that you're doing.
Okay.
Okay, I guess the point is that from the conservative point of view, there's a difference between a safety net and a hammock.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think that you know, when you have a nanny state that takes care of all your needs from cradle to the grave, you lose freedom, you lose a sense of personal initiative and responsibility, and that's not been the American way. That's not been what built this country. You know, we captured we won the West. We've been a risk-taking, individualistic, freedom-loving country for years and years and years. We are not France. We are not Europe. We're free Americans. And I think sometimes a little bit as we see this government swing so far to the left, where they say we're going to take care of everything, from your health care to your retirement to anything. The government's just going to provide for everything. And both on the state level and on the federal level, we're finding out that the goddamn cupboard is bare. There's no more money. We've squeezed the taxpayers so much that they got to work from January 1 till April 26 in this state to pay all your taxes. How much more can the government do?
You know, well, thank you. Well, Marty, you should be worried that Rush Limbaugh is going to sue you for copyright infringement. But
first of all, you know, this concept of freedom, this concept of freedom, it was here in Yorktown. It was here at you know, some of the Revolutionary War battles, Bunker Hill. America doesn't like an oppressive government, whether it's from Washington or whether it's from London across the sea.
You think that's what we have as
No,
an
but
oppressive?
you said that. I'm saying this because Rush Limbaugh copyrighted this. Rush Limbaugh was a twinkle in his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's eye long before people started saying that freedom is what this country is based on.
Marty, is there anyone who disagrees? Do you think that's what people on the left who try to help people out a little bit? You think that's what? No, wait.
This is
you
the
think
thing.
that's what they're saying?
People on the left try to do. No, what people on the left try to do is they take from Peter and they give to Paul. And guess what? When they want to get elected, they go to Paul. And they say, guess what, Paul? We got you this, 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 and this, and you keep me elected, and we're going to keep taking from Peter, and we're going to keep giving to you, and you're going to keep voting for us, and that's how this whole thing keeps going and going and going.
I got to pitch the show for
next
week.
And at some point, all of a sudden, the whole thing breaks down.
You know.
Okay, I got to pitch the show for next week.
Wait a second. Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay?
All right.
So 2 minutes, a pretty long time to pitch the show, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, but that's all I'm saying, is that this concept of freedom was here long before Rush Limbaugh. And I think that's what the conservative movement with 65 different congressmen that won seats, except for in this state, don't ask me why, but 65 congressmen, across the country, that's what they were saying. The government was coming in and saying, you have to write a 1099 for every time you buy a gun.
And that was repealed. And that was repealed.
Yeah, but why was it put there in the first place? Why? Because you have an over-oppressive federal government that is trying to get in
why I'm saying you're talking about Rush Limbaugh. You know, Marty, when Michelle Obama says that, you know what, I think that kids should get some exercise and they should have a healthy diet. And then if she goes out and she eats something that's a little bit, that's a little bit heavy. And then he goes on and starts attacking her because it's a governmental overreach.
Listen,
that's
so
ridiculous,
between
Marty.
Rush Limbaugh and his glazed donut, you got trouble.
Stop.
It's on the show.
Here it is. Listen. Next week, we have an incredible guest. His name is Michael Actis Grande. Michael Actis Grande is a partner in an accounting firm up here in Danbury. He is one of the most intelligent, animated people, next to my good friend Larry Ditkoff, that we will ever have on this show. And I'm telling you, if you don't tune in to the show next Thursday night, you will miss a show big time. Thanks so much tonight. Thanks for your patience. God bless.
Good night.
Woohoo. We're just getting heated up.